Well, good morning and thank you for joining us. I am looking forward to hearing about some of the newest features in Logos Now and how that can enhance the Logos Bible software that you already have. Today, joining us is going to be our Logos Pro, Todd Bishop. He's going to be walking you through a lot of the new features in Logos and what we can do to help you with that. He's also going to be pointing out a lot of the new features and how pardon me, he's going to be looking at some new collections as well and how some of these new features can use these new collections to expand your library and really make the most out of the new features that are added with Logos Now. So if you have any questions, we would love to answer those while we're on the air. Email those to webinars@logos.com, or if you're on Twitter, use the hashtag LogosNow. With that, we're going to jump right into it, and I'll hand it over to Todd.
Good morning. Thank you, Adam. I'm excited too. We've got some new tools and features that we want to showcase for you today. The great thing about Logos Now is that it's getting better and better all the time as we're building some of the most advanced tools for Bible study. And with Logos Now, of course, you get early release to those tools. So let's take a look at some of those today. We're going to look at some new features together. And without further delay, we're going to start with propositional outlines for the Old Testament. So we're going to start by opening up our preferred Bible. For me, it's the ESV. And we're going to go to a familiar narrative together. One of my favorites, Ruth chapter 1. The story of Ruth, we have the text displayed as we normally see it. Here the ESV lays it out in paragraph form. But like we saw with the launch of Logos 6, propositional outlines of the New Testament feature, we have now propositional outlines for the Old Testament. Now, these outlines are going to expose the structure of a passage. This is going to help us for pointing out units of text to preach. It's also going to highlight key literary devices, which is great for biblical narrative. The authors of the Bible use literary devices to point out certain things, to emphasize certain points in the story, and to help people remember the story through oral tradition. So here in Ruth chapter 1, this is a great example. To turn on the graphic display of propositional outlines, go to the visual filter menu, and we're going to scroll down in the menu, and we're going to toggle on propositional outlines. And right away, in verse 1, line 1, we're presented with the label background temporal. This is some background information, and Logos is indicating that through the label. If you want to define what this label is and its significance, you can always hover over the label. Here, the speaker is giving us information that we need to know as we move through the rest of the story. In this event, there's a famine in the land. But before that, the author tells us that this story took place during the time of the Judges. Now, if you remember back in the book of Judges, Judges was a time when there was no king in Israel and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Now, what's significant later on in the story is that we meet two characters, one man, Boaz, and one woman, Ruth, who are going to do what is right in God's eyes. And I'm going to show you how that develops really quickly. After the event, or after the background label, we have a very important label called departure. Here, the speaker is asserting that someone is leaving the current scene. Now, because of the famine, Logos is telling us that the man from Bethlehem, that being known as Elimelech, leaves Bethlehem in search of food. Now, there's some irony here. There's a famine in the land. There's a shortage of food. So the man and his entire family pick up their stuff and leave the house of food, which is what Bethlehem is translated as, and they go to a foreign land. So a little bit of irony here, and Logos is going to bring this to the surface with these labels, departure. Next, notice the label of arrival down in 2E. Here it says that they went into the country of Moab. So here they sojourn in this country for quite a while, but they're going to come back to Bethlehem following the death of Elimelech, Mahlon, and eventually Chilion. So I'm going to scroll down, and in the very end of this chapter, in line 22C, we go from departure to arrival, and then in 22C, back to arrival. So we started in Bethlehem. That's where the story begins. They get up from Bethlehem and go to Moab, and that's where they arrive the second time. And then it comes full circle right here to the city of Bethlehem again. And here they're going to receive the blessings of God. Now, something just to keep in mind as you move through the Old Testament, whenever you see a figure going towards Bethlehem, you can expect the Lord's blessing on their life. So all of this has been noted by Logos propositional outlines. So a great feature for pointing these things out. Moving on to chapter 2, let me just point out a couple more things. As we hover over the label of characterization, here the speaker is describing something or someone in further detail. Here we have the description of the major character in chapter 2, which is going to be Boaz. Boaz is a relative of Naomi's husband, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Now, this phrase, a worthy man, let me highlight it here for you, is very significant because later on, after Ruth displays her character and godliness, he is going to call her a worthy woman or a woman of nobility. And the same word is going to be used to describe her. So when you're working through a biblical narrative like this, these are key literary devices that we need to point out: characterization, temporal movements, arrivals, and departures. And these things have been labeled using propositional outlines. Now, to turn the visual filter off, go back to the visual filter menu, scroll down, and simply toggle the feature off. So that's exposing some of the structure and some of the key literary devices. Now, if you continue to read through the book of Ruth, and again, this one's been on my mind, one of my favorite stories, Ruth meets Boaz in a very peculiar way. Ruth goes out to the fields of Boaz, and there she begins to glean some of the leftovers that some of the farmers and reapers have left behind. Now, this is actually in accordance with a very specific Old Testament law. And let me show you how to find that law. This is a new interactive tool called Commandments of the Law. We can go to Tools, and from the Tools menu, select to open all of your interactive resources. Now, you can see here there is a new interactive tool, which is new only for Logos Now, called Commandments of the Law. Let's select the title to open this interactive together. Now, as we open this in a new panel, Logos displays 613 commandments of the law in the main portion of the screen, and then gives us some significant browsing options and filtering options to the left. Now, in our story, Ruth has just lost her husband, and she is a widow. So as we look for laws that apply just to widows, we can scroll down, and we can sort these laws by people, places, things, themes, and so forth. Let's look under People. Choose More to see more options. And now scroll down and notice that there are 9 commandments of the law that apply to a widow or mention a widow. So let's select this option, and Logos will filter the laws that show up on the screen to just those that apply to a widow. Now under P or beside P122, you'll see a law called the forgotten sheaf for the poor. To see these texts in the biblical text, you can hover over the link for Leviticus 19:9, and it says, "When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edges, neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest." You're supposed to leave some behind. Now, Deuteronomy 24 gives us a little bit more information, who this is for. "When you reap your harvest in the field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back and get it. It shall be for the sojourner," that's the foreigner, which Ruth is, "the fatherless," that's the orphan, "and the widow," which Ruth also is, "that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands." So an easy way for us to identify the right law, because there's so many, and it can be a hard thing to remember. Now, to see more of the law and more details about the law, select the label P122, and you can see who it applies to, whether it's applicable today, things that are involved, the literary type, but also notice in the final section here in the description, we have links to Judaica. This is going to allow us to jump to commentary from the Talmud about this law. You can see as I hover over here, we can see some of the excerpts that are noted in this corpus of literature. So a very powerful way not only to identify specific laws and who they apply to and things that they apply to, but now we can jump to some of the early Jewish literature, and we can see late interpretations of that law. So a really fun interactive. I encourage you to play around with this and have some fun. Next, we're going to stay in the Old Testament, and I want to show you a brand new feature called Synopsis of Samuel and Kings. So in the panel where my library is open, we're going to jump down to the title, Synopsis, Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles. Select to open this interactive, and Logos will display the text in front of you. Now, we want to look at a specific passage, so I'm going to go to another familiar passage, maybe one of the most important Old Testament texts, 2 Samuel chapter 7. If you're familiar with this text, this is where God makes that covenant with David. Now, right now, I'm just looking at references and the parallel text between 2 Samuel 7 and 1 Chronicles 17, where we have the second account or an additional account of this promise made to David. Now, to see the biblical text side by side from these two references, simply select the blue arrow and Logos will display the text below. Of course, you can change the style of your text or the version of your text appropriately to whatever you want. Now, let's scroll down, and for this example, let's focus in on the promise section beginning here in verse 12. Now, with this interactive tool, we can first identify clear differences between the parallel accounts. Look at 2 Samuel 7, 14 through 15. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. When he commits iniquity, I will discipline him with the rod of men, with the stripes of the sons of men. But my steadfast love will not depart from him, as it did from Saul when I put him away from you. Now, the parallel text in 1 Chronicles 17:13 leaves out the significant part about when he commits iniquity. I will discipline him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the sons of men. Now, you can interpret that however you want, but it may be because 2 Samuel is particularly transparent about the character of the kings, and Samuel in general notes the great sin of David and Bathsheba. So just a great way to point out, and an easy way to point out some of the differences. Similarities are also identified using this tool. Look with me at 2 Samuel 7:16. Notice the parallelism in these lines. And your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever. Now, there is parallelism between kingdom and throne. Both of these words are synonymous, or throne represents kingdom. Now, in 1 Chronicles 17:14, we have minor differences, but we still have the parallelism between kingdom and throne. This text says, but I will confirm him in my house and in my kingdom forever, and his throne shall be established forever. So I hope that this example, you can see some of the value that comes from comparing these parallel texts in the important historical books and biblical narratives of the Old Testament. Now, we're going to shift gears just a little bit, and we're going to move to a new guide section in our passage guide called Systematic Theologies. And I think a lot of you are excited about this one. This has been one of our more popular features with Logos Now. Let's jump to a text together. Let's stay in 2 Samuel, if you will. 2 Samuel chapter 7, and we'll select verses 1 through 17. Now, what the Systematic Theology section allows you to do is see how a passage informs Christian theology. So we saw how we can expose the structure of a text. We saw how we can pinpoint certain commandments of the law. We saw how we can compare Old Testament texts from Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles. Now we're going to look at our systematic theologies and see how this passage informs Christian theology. Now, under the Systematic Theology section, after you run your guide, you'll note that we have sub-disciplines: theology proper, bibliology, Christology. All of these sections you can hover over to see a brief definition if you're not sure what they mean. Now, in these sub-disciplines, we can see how this verse, 2 Samuel 7, 1 through 17, informs Christology, how it informs pneumatology, and so forth and so on. Now, because this is a text that is applied to Jesus in many places, we're going to click on the arrow that says Christology next to it. And here we can see denominational groups. Our references are now subdivided into denominational categories. We can see Anglican interpretations, Baptist interpretations, Congregational, Lutheran, Methodist, and the list goes on. So if you're of a particular tradition, you may want to start there first, but then to compare other interpretations and see how this text informs different traditions, I encourage you to jump to different sections like Presbyterian or Reformed. And with any of these links, of course, you just hover over the verse to see a preview or the title to see a preview, or jump to that section of the resource by clicking the title with me. So this is the Systematic Theology section. Let's run one more guide report so that we can, again, focus on the power of this section. Let's look at the Christ hymn in Philippians 2, 6 through 7. And the guide regenerates. Now, under systematic theologies, we're looking at how Philippians 2, 6 through 7 informs our systematic theological resources and how they discuss this passage in relationship to certain doctrines. We can again jump down to Christology, a very important topic addressed here by Paul in Philippians 2, and we can see different interpretations of how this verse is applied to theological traditions. Now, what's great about this feature, as Adam mentioned in the beginning of our webinar, we've actually created a feature collection, a collection of all of your systematic theologies that work right here within this guide section. So if this is a section that you love and you use a lot and you really enjoy it, I'd encourage you to pick up that bundle of resources to really get the most out of this section. You can see that mine's fairly full because I do own that bundle. So again, to get the most out of this guide section, be sure to check out Systematic Theologies Feature Collection. Again, with any of these references, we can hover over the title to get a glimpse, or we can click the link and jump right to that section. Now, at the bottom, let me show you one other advantage of this feature. Scrolling down to the bottom, a long list of our systematic theologies, very important verse here for our systematic theologies. We can jump down to the bottom link that says, Search All Theologies. When you click the link, Logos generates a new search for Philippians 2, 6 through 7 in my systematic theological collection. You can see that's noted here at the top. Now, we just did that, and Logos put it into helpful categories. So why would I want to run this search? Let me show you why. We can add key terms to this reference range and identify specific places where our systematic theologies mention a topic in relationship to Philippians 2, 6 through 7. So for example, let's look at hypostatic. In hypostatic, run the search with Philippians 6 through 7, and here you can identify this term and where it occurs in sections that discuss the verse we entered. So a lot of functionality here, a lot of power, and we've bundled the resources that work best with this section. Moving down, now we're going to go from Christian theology now to Christian confessional documents. These include our creeds, our catechisms. These are important to certain traditions, and there's a lot that we can learn from these documents. So we can see how Philippians 2, 6 through 7 is mentioned in some of these major creeds, confessions, and catechisms. And now we have our subdivisions of theological doctrines like Christology, theology proper, and now all of my early church documents are listed below that mention this text. And again, the subcategories are denominationally organized so that we can jump to a specific doctrine or a specific group of doctrines that come from a specific tradition, like Reformed. Christology, again, we have plenty of references here, all the way back to Cyril of Alexandria and his tomes against Nestorius, a famous work that he wrote against that combating theologian. So that's the confessional documents. Now, like systematic theologies, you're seeing a lot of similarities here between these two features. We also have a feature collection built for this section as well, and we're running that at 15% off, I believe, right now. So a great deal on that. Check it out. And again, if this is a section that interests you and something that you can see yourself getting a lot of value out of, please pick that up. It's the best way to run these sections to get the most out of these sections in Logos Now. Now, switching gears completely, we've gone from a study of the text to how it informs theology. Now I want to show you how to cultivate and surface some of the best and most relevant illustrations in media for when you're teaching, preaching, or simply communicating a biblical concept. For this example, let's go to Tools together. If you're following along, we're going to open up the media browser. I'm going to go ahead and dock this panel. And you can see all of the media that generates in the main portion of the screen, but all of the filter options that we now have in the left panel. We can scroll down this panel and see all the different ways that we can browse our media by collection. If you're interested in ancient ruins and photographs of those ancient ruins, I suggest the Beitzel Photo Library is definitely an amazing tool. Lots of great photos there that you can use as illustrations. Tags, the kind of media, whether it's an image, a video, and so forth. different authors, and then biblical entities like people, places, and things that are associated with that media, as well as events and biblical concepts. One of the browsing options that I find extremely helpful is the preaching themes section. If you're preaching on wisdom and need some art to inspire your people, here we have great verse of the day art, and as you might imagine, most of these come from the book of Proverbs. Now, by selecting wisdom, I filtered out all of the art that doesn't pertain to wisdom, and the ones that do are just listed here for us. Now, to get back to the main portion of the screen, you can click the X, or you could have clicked the all link as well. And now we're back to our original home screen. So if you're wanting to preach on biblical idolatry, a great place to begin, let's scroll down and let's look at biblical things together. And here we see that one of the categories is pagan temple. When I select this option, Logos culls through all of my media that I have access to and gives me the results that are most related to what I'm searching for. Now, here you can see that we have a bunch of different media, pieces of media associated with pagan temples. Specifically with idolatry, we have the figure of Artemis. This is from Paul's journey in Ephesus, and we can get a great illustration of what that statue looked like. Now, you can even combine some of the browsing options with some of the things that you know you're looking for. So we've selected pagan temple. As you can see up here, we have 777 results. Now, let's come in here and let's enter Acts 19. Here we have the bronze figure of Artemis. So just a great way to combine browsing options with search queries, and you can find a bunch of media that's going to fit your needs. So that's the media browser. Next, we want to move to a secondary browser, another interactive tool that allows us to browse not media, but extant New Testament manuscripts. Again, let's return to the library panel that we have open here that's looking at all of our interactive resources. And now let's scroll down and select New Testament Manuscript Explorer. Now, definitely a more technical tool, but there's a lot that we can learn even without browsing or filtering any of the options here from the left. Right away, looking at all of the extant manuscripts, we see a total number of 5,624. We can understand the complexity of textual traditions. There are so many copies of the New Testament, and some of those copies are going to cover different books of the Bible, which you can see under the column labeled Content here in the main portion of the screen. Now, E represents the Gospels, A represents Acts, James through Jude, P represents the Pauline epistles, including Hebrews, and R represents Revelation. Now, from the left, we can see that most of the manuscripts in this interactive are labeled minuscule. Now, we only have 129 papyrus, so the majority of New Testament manuscripts were written in minuscule form. And most of them cover the Gospels because that may have been what was most essential to the Gospel account, of course. So we can get a lot of different discoveries just from looking at the panel to the left. We can also see that there are different textual categories like Byzantine and Alexandrian. If we select Alexandrian, we can see some of the earliest extant manuscripts of the New Testament, with the majority of these, looking under the date section, occurring or being written or compiled in the 3rd century, of 37 to be exact. Now, there's one other feature. I'm going to click the X to go back to the original view. And I'm going to sort by another category that we haven't looked at called tags. Here you can see that we can sort all of our manuscripts by those that are cited in the UBS 5th edition, all of those that have been consistently cited in the NA28. Let's select this option. And now we can see how important this textual tradition, being the Alexandrian tradition, how important that is to this modern edition of the Greek New Testament. And again, this is something that we could spend probably the rest of our time on, but definitely to get a good grasp of the landscape of textual tradition, the New Testament Manuscript Explorer will help you do that. And you really do come across some great discoveries. So moving from New Testament Manuscript Explorer, let's now open up one of the most powerful tools in Logos Cloud, or Logos Now. It's called the Concordance tool. So the Concordance tool will open here on the left, and you'll see that it's generating information. And this information, all of the data now displayed on my screen, comes from the ESV. You can change the data that you're curating here in the Concordance tool to a commentary, a book of the Bible, to really any text in your library. So it may take a little while if you choose a different version of the Bible or an original language text or even a commentary, but just wait for it to generate because it's curating all of the data from that resource and giving you access to that data in the main portion of the screen. Right now, you can see that we're looking at all of the words that appear in the ESV, and they're organized according to frequency. And we can quickly change that. So now we're looking at all of the words in the ESV. Let's look at a specific passage so that we can make some discoveries together. Let's change all passages to the book of 1 John. Press enter. Now you can see all of the words that appear in 1 John in the English Standard Version, and they're ordered according to frequency. Now, what if you wanted to go a little bit deeper and look at the original language information? We don't want to see what the English words, we don't want to see the English words that are used. Let's look at the Greek lemmas. Select word, and from this column, the list of options below, select lemma. And now we can see frequency of lemmas listed below. Notice that we have all sorts of words, pronouns mostly, but then when we get down to some of the major terms like agapao, and you can see all the places that John uses this term in this first letter. Uses it 28 times, and all of the references are listed below. Now, if you wanted to narrow that even further and just look at the verbs and which verbs occur most frequently, you can select verbs from the left, and you can see that the list of terms refreshes. And now we have the most frequent verbs. Of course, Amy is at the beginning, but agapao is close behind it with 28 occurrences, and then echo. So just a great way to see some of the major terms, maybe key terms that an author is using so that you can start to preach on major themes that run through a book of the Bible. Now, let's go from 1 John, and I want to show you one additional feature of this Logos Now tool. We're going to change it from 1 John now to the book of Luke. Let's enter. Right now, we're looking at all of the lemmas that occur in Luke's gospel. I want to change lemma to biblical entity. This powerful option is going to allow us to see what people, places, things are mentioned in Luke's gospel, and it's going to list them according to frequency. Most frequently, of course, Jesus is mentioned, disciples, and so forth. But if we scroll down the options to the left, we can now sort biblical entities by kind. I want to look at all of the cities mentioned by Luke. You might have heard that cities are very important. Geography in general is very important to Luke and is apparent in his writings. When we search by city, notice the city that comes up at the top, Jerusalem. And to see all of the lists for Jerusalem, all 59 occurrences of this biblical entity, just select the arrow and Logos generates the list below. So that's the Concordance tool. Again, so powerful. Even with commentaries, you can see frequently used terms, even transliterated terms. So I encourage you, spend some time in this tool. We've just scratched the surface and covered the basics. So let's move on together. Get a little bit more technical. I want to look at Greek grammatical constructions of the Greek New Testament. This is going to be found in the Exegetical Guide. We haven't looked at the Exegetical Guide yet. If you want to access this guide, go to Guides, and we're going to select to open Exegetical Guide. Now, let's stay in the book of Luke together. Let's do Luke 22:16. If you're not familiar with this text, I'll open it to the right for you by selecting the link at the top. Here, Jesus says, "For I tell you, I will not eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God." Now, scrolling down to the grammatical construction section, we can see that Logos has labeled this text emphatic negation. It's one of the strongest ways for someone to express negation in the New Testament. If you want a brief definition of this grammatical construction, simply hover over the label and Logos will define it for you. Now, it is made up, according to this definition, of two negators, ou, followed by the negator me. When we look down in the word-by-word analysis, you can see exactly how this plays out in this New Testament text. When I hover over the word not, you can see that the Greek is highlighting two terms, ou and me. That's emphatic negation. Now, if you want to search all of the New Testament for this grammatical construction, simply click the link, search for emphatic negation. Click the link, and Logos runs the results. Very powerful. So if you're looking for how this is expressed in other places, you can run the search. Right now, we're showing it in a basic search. If you want to switch to Bible, you can do that as well, and then just press enter. And there your text displayed in the ESV. Now, what if you want to do a little bit more research on emphatic negation? That's where the grammar section in the exegetical guide comes in. Now we've taken all of your grammars, and by the way, there's a feature collection for this feature as well. So for Logos Now, you can purchase all of the grammars that fulfill this or fill this section, and you can get the most out of it using the grammars feature collection. Now, here we have references to our reference grammars, and we've put them in contextual categories. So if you want to look at certain spellings, the first option, morphology, and even syntax. Now, in this contextual category of morphology, we can do more investigation on a temporal sentence, which is what we have here in Luke 22:16. If you want to look at the syntax and how this verse is used or referenced in your reference grammars, you can simply select syntax, and there's a great article here that I got a chance to look at earlier, time upon to which, and you can read that as I click on the link. So that's the Greek grammatical construction section in combination with the new grammar section. So we not only identify significant grammatical constructions, but with the grammar section, we give you the opportunity to discover more about the semantic value of that grammatical construction. So just one more that I think we have time for, we're running out of time here, is how to improve your layout. This is the multi-panel resource tool. We're going to close all of these tabs so we can get a good look at this together. And then I'm going to open up my preferred Bible, which is the ESV. Now, let's imagine just for a second that we're studying Malachi. One thing that I've always wanted is a Greek to English, Hebrew to English diglot. And then I'd love to be able to search for terms or even phrases within that diglot and show my results in both the English text and in the original languages. With the multi-resource panel view, we can do that. So we're here in Malachi, and I want to turn on the multi-view resource panel by selecting this multiple resources button in the toolbar. When I select this option, Logos is going to give me the ability to enter a text that I want to display side by side with the ESV. Now, because we're in the Old Testament, let's start with a Hebrew Bible. The LHB will do, and we can toggle that on with a check. But let's also enter the NA28. Let's toggle that resource on as well. Now, notice when I turn on the NA28 that nothing changes on the display. That's because we're in the Old Testament. Just wait until we move into the book of Matthew. Now, let me show you the power of this. When I start to scroll in the parent text, which in this example is the ESV, the Hebrew text is going to scroll side by side with me. Now I can also scroll in the Hebrew text and nothing happens in the ESV. That's because it will only scroll simultaneously when you scroll in the parent version. Now, if we want to search for a term, we can right-click in the ESV, select the term from the context menu, and then choose to run a search inline and watch what happens. Logos runs the search and then displays the results in both texts. Now, of course, we have occurrences of servant here in the book of Malachi, but we also have them in Matthew. Look what happens when I scroll down to these results. Logos automatically changes the version that I'm displaying side by side from the LHB to the NA28. So a great way to improve your searching ability and even the layout of your Logos Bible software, giving you more flexibility to really do the things that you want to do. Now, this also works great for commentaries. Let's say there's a couple commentaries that you love to read and you'd like to see them displayed side by side with the verse you're studying. Let's clear our inline search. And let's go back to the multiple resources button. And let's deselect LHB and NA28 and notice that the ESV goes back to its normal state. Now let's replace NA28 with a commentary. Simply enter Matthew. Now we see some of our top commentaries listed below. I like the NAC as well as the Pillar New Testament commentary, so I'll select both of those. And automatically Logos displays those texts below. Again, as I scroll in the ESV, the commentaries are going to keep up. so I can read scholarly notes along with the biblical text at any point in time. So that's multiple resources. It's a great way to enhance not only your searching ability, but the way that your Logos system layout works for you. So that's all the time we have. I hope this was very informative. If you have any more questions, again, we love to hear those. We try to get to all the questions and answer those in a timely manner. So we're going to take just a few questions at this point and hopefully continue to help you out.
All right, so remember, we do want to get to as many of those questions as we can on the air. So if you still have a question that you want to send in, go ahead and do that by emailing webinars@logos.com or using the Twitter handle or Twitter hashtag, that is hashtag Logos Now. So Todd, the first question that we have comes from our forums, actually, and is more of an advanced search kind of question. The question is, what is the difference between using an equal sign or a tilde when using a data type or label search? Maybe you could just show us what they mean by that. What is a data type search? And then answer the question about the tilde.
Well, luckily, I had a little bit of time to read this question on the forum and prepare an answer for you. And I think it's a question that a lot of people have. Some of our searches look complex, but I think after I explain it, it's going to make a lot of sense. So let's start by opening up a search panel together. And I previously ran a few searches that match the data type search type. You can see here that I searched the label of the Psalms Explorer. So I'm going to open that up. Here you can see that I'm searching some of the categories. I built my syntax from the Psalms Explorer dataset. I'm doing a label search of the psalm where the structure is acrostic. Now, notice I'm using the tilde. The tilde is going to include any psalm that's been labeled acrostic, whether that is also labeled as chiastic. So if you want to search just acrostic labeled psalms that don't include any other labeling or tagging, you can simply add the equal sign and watch how my results change from 344 down to 249. So if you want to do an exact search, use the equal sign. If you want to do an about search, search for a tag that may be used in correlation with another tag, you can use the tilde. Let me show you that one more time. So the tilde, I'm going to run an about search. That's more results, and these are psalms that are going to include also chiastic psalms that may also be acrostic. And that doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And you can apply this to a bunch of different searches of data types.
Okay, Todd, so we have a related question here. Suppose that you have an idea what sort of search you want to run, what sort of information you're looking for, but you're not quite sure how to express that as in search syntax. How would you go about trying to figure out what to actually type into the search box?
That's actually a question that I get a lot. So how do I start a search? How do I then build on that search? And my advice to you is start with searches that you know or that can be exposed to the context menu. Let me give you a couple of examples. Again, some of our searches may appear complex on the surface, but once I show you how to create them and then how to build upon them, hopefully it'll be a little clearer and a little easier for you to use. So we're in the ESV. I'm going to take off the two commentaries that we added through multiple resources. Just look at the ESV. Let's go to a text. I was just demoing this text the other day, Matthew chapter 4. Very familiar text. Here, Satan is speaking. Jesus is speaking. Satan's even quoting the Bible in one instance. But here we know Satan is speaking, or Jesus is rebuking Satan when he says, "Be gone, Satan." When I right-click inside this text, notice in the context menu that Logos tells me that Jesus is the speaker, indicated by the speaker icon and the speaker label, but Satan is the addressee. Now, I can right-click to find everywhere that Jesus is the speaker in the New Testament by running a search. So select the labeled data at the bottom, and then choose Search this resource. And of course, this is going to reproduce quite a bit of results. Now, how do I build on this? Well, let's copy the search that we just entered We copy the command with Control-C on a Mac, and then I'm going to paste it again, just following that command. And now let's adjust it a bit. Let's say we want to find every place where Jesus is speaking, and then God is the addressee. He's speaking to God the Father. Let's change speaker to addressee. And now let's change person Jesus to God. Now when I run the search, you can see every place, and this is a cool search, isn't it? This is everywhere that Jesus speaks to the Father. So again, start with the information that you know, and then move on by building and replicating searches and extending that query to make some really neat discoveries. Also, let me show you as I open up a new search panel here, there is a help page on a user-edited wiki that's very helpful. It gives you examples for searches and gives you all the different types of searches that you can run in Logos.
All right, thanks, Todd. This question comes from Tim, and going back to the multi-view resources, he's asking, is there a shortcut to display a volume of commentaries such as pillar without typing all? Correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but I think you're asking, can you add an entire series of pillar without typing in every single volume?
That's a good question. It seems to be that when you're in the ESV, and you want to add the pillar series, it's easiest to go in to type in the series, or sorry, the book of the Bible that you're in to display your prioritized list of commentaries. You can see here as I typed in Matthew, I get the Pillar New Testament Commentary Series. Now, we can enter pillar, and it's going to display all of the pillar commentaries. Now, the reason why you may not want to add the pillar commentary as a default for every time you go to a New Testament text is because the Pillar New Testament commentary doesn't cover all the books of the Bible. So let's start here in Matthew, and let's enter pillar. And you can see down at the bottom we have Matthew. So now we're displaying the pillar commentary. Now let's jump to the book of Mark. Mark, instead of the Pillar New Testament commentary, let's deselect that. Actually, I'm going to keep that one on. So there's Matthew's New Testament, Pillar New Testament commentary on Matthew. Now let's type in Mark and find a different commentary. So Mark, we do have the pillar, but let's say that we prefer the NIGTC. Let's select this commentary, and there we have our text. Now we can read the NIGTC alongside Mark, and now when I jump to the book of Matthew, watch what happens. It goes back to the Pillar New Testament commentary. So this gives you a level of flexibility that you might not have if you just add an entire series. So I hope that's helpful for you. Great question. Thank you.
And then one more follow-up question on multi-view resources, Todd. Is there a way to save which resources you have set here?
Yes. One thing that I would always encourage you to do is that when you find a layout that works for you, make sure you go to the Layouts button, open the menu, and then Save as Name Layout. Name the layout something that you like commentary, comparison. Let's enter, and you'll see that new layout is displayed to the left. Now, when I close these windows, go back to the layout, select commentary comparison, it displays as I saved it. So very helpful. Now, if this is a layout that you use all the time, I'd also encourage you, don't just save it as a named layout, but you can also drag the commentary comparison title into the favorites bar, and now you can access it anytime you want. So by now selecting the commentary comparison toolbar shortcut, now I can click that and it opens to the layout that I saved. So very quick way to get back to your research as you left it, or to go to a layout that you use all the time.
All right. Well, thank you, Todd. That is all the time that we have today for questions, but I do want to encourage you to keep sending those in. Even if you have ideas for what comments or what webinars you'd like to see in the future, we're always looking for new ideas, and especially we want to do things that are helpful to you. So send those in along with any questions you have to webinars@logos.com. Did want to mention again that we have the coupon going on right now for those feature collections. Again, the features themselves are part of Logos Now, such as the grammatical constructions, the confessional section in the passage guide. But we do have feature expansion collections so that you can add more resources to your library and get better use out of those tools. We're offering 15% off of those this week if you use the coupon code NOWTRAINING. If you want to watch this webinar or any of our previous webinars again, you can also go back to logos.com/webinar archive. And if you just want a quick reminder for what does this feature do or what does that feature do for Logos Now or any of the features in Logos Bible software, you can also find those at logos.com/logospro. Thank you for watching, and we're looking forward to having you again next time.